We'll now have our next three finalists who will be coming over in sequence and presenting their papers. To get started with the first paper. What is common between a driverless car, a drone delivering a package at the top of a skyscraper, a robotic instrument performing surgery, and a robot amusing the elderly? Well, our next paper answers all of these questions, and it is titled as Revolutionize Product Testing and Optimization in Food and Beverage with Artificial Intelligence. And to present this, we have Hoshang Dotiwala, Regional Director, Product Optimization Practice Lead, APMEA, Nielsen IQ Basis, Benedict Beaumont, Global Innovation Manager, Gastrograph AI, who will be connecting with us virtually, and the co-author, Jason Cohen, founder and CEO, Gastrograph AI. A big round of applause for Hoshang.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So yes, already some context has been set, so we know what we're going to present about. So we spoke about what is common between a driverless car, a drone delivering a packet at the top of a skyscraper, a robotic arm conducting surgery, a robot amusing an elderly citizen. What's common to all of them? It's artificial intelligence. And it's time now to revolutionize the practice of product testing and optimization in foods and beverages with artificial intelligence. That's me on the left there. And I'm joined today by my esteemed co-author, Benedict Beaumont, who's the Global Innovation Manager for Gastrograph AI. And I am representing Nielsen IQ Basis. So yes, there is a new age revolution in product testing optimization. Now, all of us who have done product testing, majority of the work that still happens in product testing is yet rooted in consumer data. Our questionnaires, in a way, are still imposed on consumers. We still capture variables like overall taste, overall mouthfeel, and we end up with multicollinear data. Over a period of time, this practice advanced to the science of correlating sensory data with consumer liking data. So consumers are expected to tell us what they like, and sensory R&D sources try and tell us why something is liked. And this has served the industry well, and it continues to serve well. But whenever we embark upon a consumer CLT plus sensory data study, these kind of studies tend to be lengthy and costly. So where are we evolving to from here? What next? So yes, we will still be relying on a trained panel of human testers whose job will be to objectively profile products on sensory attributes. But here's the next big thing. Artificial intelligence now replaces the consumer, and artificial intelligence will predict overall liking of any product that is tested. You don't need to go and ask the consumer, tell me how much did you like or dislike a particular product. So let's just take a little bit of a backseat and look at how traditional product testing and optimization has been approached. And it would be fair to introspect certain aspects about the practice. Largely, whenever we do product testing, even today, it tends to be done in piecemeal. And as a practice, it's less focused on trying to gather foundational understanding, foundational learning about the category. So we end up doing piecemeal testing. The client comes with a brief and says, I want these 2 products tested, and these are the 2 benchmarks, and that's how we go about it. So we're not really focused on trying to learn category drivers that will stand the test of time for even 2-3 years, or trying to unearth new potential flavor opportunities, new line extension opportunities which are driven by consumer palate. Then there is a sense of resigned acceptance at times whenever we achieve parity versus in-market leaders versus benchmarks. The final recommendations are always about the direction of change and rather than the delta of change. We're always, R&D is always having this conversation, okay, you're telling me I need to move my attribute in this direction, but by how much? And, that's not technically possible to do with consumer data. And of course, the outcome, the results are contextually limited by what gets tested. So the outcome doesn't step beyond the boundaries of what gets tested. And hence, it's limiting in the sense that it doesn't help us to discover new, novel, white space opportunities. We end up repeatedly including the same products across multiple studies, sometimes even unbeknownst to us. And as a result, we end up with multiple data points for the same product. And then that leads to debatable conversations around product testing and the practice. And finally, lack of retesting. So whenever we do product testing and we say, okay, here are the recommendations in order to develop the product, in order to optimize the product, yes, reformulation happens, but retesting, validation does not take place. Well, yes, the times are truly changing. So when it comes to traditional product testing and optimization, so far, R&D have to prepare and ship samples by the hundreds. We still have to recruit consumers every single time by the hundreds. We have to hire venues, purchase all sorts of minutiae and paraphernalia to, conduct the CLT. And finally, after doing all of this, the outcome is relatively distant from sensory R&D terms. So keeping this in mind, if we embrace artificial intelligence, which is truly novel and revolutionary, what's the difference? R&D now will need to prepare and ship samples in only tens. And of course, we don't need to recruit consumers now. We only need to hire a dozen odd trained panelists for a one-time objective profiling exercise. And yes, we can say goodbye to CLT venues. And the outcome will be closer to sensory R&D terms. Now, on this slide, what we're seeing is basically, these are the basic key broad objectives of product testing. Whenever we do a product testing study, we want to know, obviously, what is the overall liking of products, how are the products tiered in terms of appeal. We want to know what is the hierarchy of the drivers of liking from a category perspective, keeping in mind the set of products that has been tested. And of course, we want to optimize and ensure higher liking so that when we develop and optimize the product prototype, it is capable of achieving significantly higher liking than the benchmarks. Now, the use of artificial intelligence not only fulfills all these basic objectives, but even exceeds these objectives. And it does that by applying global learning across categories, across countries, and by applying cutting-edge machine learning technology. So AI is essentially a calibrated approach that can predict overall liking across countries without having to approach consumers. So it does this based on learning and recognition of flavor signatures. And based on that, AI also provides us with the hierarchy of category drivers in sensory terms. When it comes to optimization, there are no limits. AI has multiple ways of doing optimization, which will range from unconstrained to constrained models, specifically targeting highly liked sensory profiles. Just to give you an example of what is a constrained model. So for instance, if R&D comes back and says, okay, this is great, I can see the outcome, I'm getting an optimized profile, but I can't increase, let's say, the level of sugar or the level of some other ingredient because of government regulations. So AI can factor in all those constraints and come up with an optimized profile. And yes, AI will give optimization guidance in sensory terms, and it will also provide the delta in terms of the sensory impact, the delta that each sensory aspect needs to undergo. And with that, I will now hand over the presentation to my colleague and co-author, Benedict. Benedict, all yours.
Thank you, Ocean. Thanks. So hello, my name is Benedict, Global Innovation Manager at Gastrograph AI. So today I'll explain a little bit more how the AI works, and then we'll walk through a little case study to illustrate. So there are really 4 steps for the AI to work. The first one is the data collection. So we need real people to test, about 20 panelists to test the product, to enter the product into the database. Once the product is in the database, we can run the AI against the model for a specific target demographic. That will give us prediction on perception and preference of a product. And once we have those perception, we can then optimize it to match better the preference of the target population. There are several ways to optimize the product. We'll see it in a couple of slides. But first, for the AI to work, we need first to build a model. So we need to have real people testing real products. So in India, we recruited about 3,500 consumers. We made them try a mix of food and beverage product, a mix of branded products with a mix of local cuisine. So they tested about 100 different products to build the model. So now that we have this model in the database, we actually don't need Indian consumer to review the product to make predictions for the Indian population. So we developed a little case study based on samosas to illustrate. We profiled 3 samosas, one from Lucknow, one from Ahmedabad, and one from Chennai. And we ran it against the AI for 4 different regions. So for the north, the east, the south, and the west of India, to see which samosa is preferred in each region and how we can improve it. So what we found out that the Lucknow samosa is the most preferred one everywhere in India, and the least preferred one is the Chennai one. So now, what makes a good samosa? Well, we can look at the market preference landscape map in India, and we can see that in the green area, we see drivers of preference for the product. So in the samosa landscape, spices, earthiness, and mouthfeel will drive the preference up. And in the more red area, where you see those terms rich and nasal, roasted, and rich, it will drive preference down in a samosa. So every pixel that you see on this map represents a flavor profile of a samosa. It can be from a real samosa that has been tested by a panelist and entered in the database, or it can be a simulation of the AI that created a new profile of a samosa by changing the intensity of the flavors in the samosa and simulating a preference model and simulating the preference for the Indian population. But so now we see that the Lucknow samosa, the product C, is driven by spices and earthiness. Now we can zoom in the flavor profile of this samosa to see exactly what is the composition of the flavor. And that's what we see on the screen now. So the AI can generate a flavor profile decomposition, which shows all the flavors that compose the samosa. So here we can see that there are 52% of spices in this Lucknow samosa, which is composed of 3% of garlic, 3% of black pepper, 3% of coriander, etc., etc. So now imagine that you're an Ahmedabad samosa producer and you want to improve your samosa to make it taste as good or even better than the Lucknow samosa. There are several ways to optimize your product. The first one, you can try to copy the Lucknow samosa. So you can compare the flavor profile of those 2 products. And here we can see that compared to the Lucknow samosa, the Ahmedabad one has a little bit less spices. It has some sugar when the Lucknow one doesn't have. And it has no floral, sour, and acidity and woody notes. So there are some ways of improving the product. And we can zoom on each flavor and what flavor needs to be increased, decreased, added, or removed to match the Lucknow samosa. So here you need to increase chili powder, you need to decrease turmeric, you need to add some cayenne pepper, remove allspice and curry leaves. And so this is for the spices attribute, but you can do that for every attribute that compose the samosa. And then we have a second pass of optimization for the samosa using leveraging the liking prediction for each attribute intensity chain. So the AI can generate the consumer preference at every intensity of each attribute. That's what you see here on the screen at the sensory level, at the sensory attribute level. So in this samosa, the level of spices is great, it's optimal, but you see that if you remove the spices or if you increase by a lot the spices in this samosa, it will decrease preference. And you can do that at the reference attribute level. So for each specific attribute, at what intensity would be optimal for the consumer to like it, and you can do that for cinnamon, cloves, green chili, every spices attribute that you have in the samosa. So I'll head it back to Auchan to conclude on the benefits of using AI in this industry.
Thank you, Benedict.
Thank you.
So keeping this in mind, what are the implications because of AI? What are the implications for the market research industry when it comes to product testing? So essentially, going forward now, we can do predictions for the same set of products seamlessly from one market to another, from one country to another country, without consumer testing, without having to actually approach a single consumer in any country. And of course, this is subject to doing a one-time sensory profiling exercise for each of those products. AI is definitely a foundational investment. It's not piecemeal product testing. It will give us a holistic category learning, understanding of what are the drivers of liking for my category in sensory terms. It will help us to understand how products are positioned against sensory attributes, not just against those attributes, but against on a backdrop of a potential flavor landscape, which Benedict spoke about, which essentially is basically nothing but a wide landscape of potential simulated sensory profiles which can be developed into optimized products. And this is a potential landscape which is characterized by diversity, new flavor ideas, new line extension opportunities, and therefore this will also lead us to unearth white spaces. AI goes beyond optimizing legacy products. It points out at novel opportunities in the form of new flavors, line extensions. So we can do all of that by doing pixel targeting specifically. You saw that flavor landscape map. So we can do specific pixel targeting and see which areas are giving us a higher overall liking. And by doing that, yes, we get ideas, we unearth white spaces, we get ideas for new flavor profiles, new line extension opportunities. The advantage of artificial intelligence is that it learns from across the world, across countries, across continents. It's not limited to just the country of testing. AI learns from not just the core category of products that you're testing. So yes, we do a one-time profiling exercise on a particular product category, but it doesn't just learn from that category. It also pulls in learning from adjacent categories that potentially share synergies in terms of flavors and textures. And by doing so, it can point at new, novel, highly liked opportunities by, doing category fusion and, coming up with new product ideas. And finally, in-market products, benchmarks, they don't need to be repeat tested unless and until they've undergone a formulation change. Thank you for your attention. Your questions, please.
Thank you so much, Hoshang and Benedict. We have a few questions for you from the audience. On AI product testing, is there any live case study of actual product launch basis this technique? How many, and any indication on in-market performance?
Yes, we do have validations. There are instances where products have been launched successfully. We do have such cases, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Our next question is, For the model to work, you said that you gathered data one time from across India as the training data set. Given the heterogeneity of cuisine cultures in India, how vast was this one-time study, and what was the category of stimulus used?
So in terms of vastness, we covered all the 4 zones. We covered 7 cities, the top 4 metros, and one major city in each zone. So from that perspective, yes, we have given adequate coverage, and of course there is an investment factor also behind it. If I may ask my colleague Benedict to comment on the categories that were covered.
Yeah, so we went to 7 different cities in India, and we made sure to recruit participants that will give a good sample of the Indian demographic. And for the categories of product, we usually, during the study, we do about 100 different product category. So we really try to make sure that we have a big variety of products for this study.
Yeah, so it's a fair mix of foods and beverages. So like Benedict said, we would cover, during that training calibration exercise, we would cover something like, around 100 categories, and it would be a fair mix of foods and beverages, a fair mix of, products that have global presence as well as local products, so we're also catering to the local market at that point in time, so which could also include things that are unbranded, street food, etc.
Okay, thank you. We have one more question for you though.
Okay.
How do you take care of sensory preferences basis mood, and how do you take care of evolving sensory preference over time, and hence what is the age for the pilot you conduct for AI?
Could you just repeat the first part of the question based on?
How do you take care of sensory preference basis mood?
So this is based on just objectively profiling products using a data bank of sensory attributes. So the mood factor from a pure product testing viewpoint is not currently factored in because it's an objective profiling exercise that takes place, and of course you have multiple products to be profiled. And in terms of, yes, so one is that the AI has the potential to learn, in terms of what's happening in other categories, and it pulls in that learning, into the category of interest. It learns from other countries as well. So, and it's constantly learning, as products are profiled, their data is fed into the system, it's constantly learning. So yes, it is in a way, abreast of, the trends that are taking place in terms of foods and beverages, in terms of consumer tastes. And in terms of, the time span for the, training exercise, if that was the last part of your question,
Yeah.
it can hold good for an average of, 3 years, unless and until, consumer tastes and palates evolve and keep changing drastically. But otherwise, it's, kind of good to hold for around 3 years.
And one last question for you. How often will the profiling be required, which is bound to change over time? Will be better to do actual research instead, according to you?
See, yes, that's a valid question, but that's precisely why we're doing this one-time calibration exercise, which will hold good for 2 to 3 years. And in doing so, and then using AI, there is a benefit in terms of cost and time as compared to doing piecemeal testing repeatedly again and again, so that's the advantage. Otherwise, you will be investing in, multiple regular rounds of, piecemeal testing. And, globally, global companies, have saved, thousands of dollars, using the AI approach.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Oshang and Benedict.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Benedict.
Thank you, Roshan. Bye.